Okay, so up next is Alistair Hamill. Alistair is a teacher at Lurgan College at Northern Ireland, where he is senior leader with responsibility for staff development and teaching and learning, and is also head of geography. He leads the teaching and learning committee in the Craigavon area learning community. Alistair is going to talk about some lessons learned over the past 18 months about how to support people learning in stressful and disruptive circumstances, and how these strategies can perhaps enhance our teaching moving forward. So, Alistair, if you're there, I'll hand over to you.
Yes, thanks very much indeed, David, and thanks for the opportunity to join with you tonight. Thanks to the first two speakers for some excellent points for reflection. I'm going to hopefully build on what they've said and take that right into the classroom by talking about some of the things that have been going on in my classroom in our school this year. So starting back in September, after everything that happened last year, and for those of us in post-primary, the centre determined grades process, I hope you had a chance to switch off during the summer, because last year was absolutely exhausting. And back we all came hoping for a slightly more normal first few weeks, and then this happened. What were those first 2 weeks of September all about? It seemed to me to be like what I would call the hokey cokey track and trace. They were in and they were out, and they were in and they were out. And actually, I don't know about you, but I actually found it far more disruptive this September than last September. And I suppose at that stage, I was starting to think, how is this even remotely sustainable? You know, it's bad when even the coffee won't keep you awake. And the prospects of keeping going with a year that was as disrupted as those first few weeks were absolutely very, very overwhelming and stressful. And yet the joy and the heartbeat of being in that classroom is to take a look into those young people's eyes, even behind the masks, and how good we have become at reading expressive eyes, and just looking into their eyes and realizing these remarkable, inspirational young people, this is not their fault. They didn't choose this, and we need to do everything that we possibly can to make this as survivable for them as it can be, and help them to get the kinds of grades that's going to enable them to move on. And yet, at the same time, I look into the eyes of my colleagues and I realize, those same principles apply there. The level at which teachers have stepped up over these past months and 18 months have just been so inspirational. I've always been proud of being a teacher. I have never been as proud to call myself a teacher. My name is Alistair. I spend my day in the classroom with some amazing colleagues, and I'm very, very proud of that. And that brings me back to the two principles that I was trying to grapple with this time last year as I was trying to lead our staff in how we would navigate through. And both of those are as important as each other. And I think our previous speakers have alluded to this. And yet, in a sense, they may feel like they're sitting a little bit in tension with each other. How do we make sure that we do our best for our students while at the same time making sure that we look after ourselves? And of course, I have to show you this, a cheesy pun time. Emma, you said you like a good cheesy pun. Here we go. I was looking for a GIF for a COVID keeper. This is the best that I could get. But in a sense, it kind of gave me a reminder of last year. My goodness, that was a stretch, wasn't it? And yet, how somehow we reached that, somehow we managed to make it all work. Or maybe it felt more like this. As soon as you made one save, it just came back again and again and again, just relentlessly over and over again. And it seems to me that having put in all of that effort last year to make all of those saves, wouldn't it be a shame if we lost some of those incredible things that we gained? So what are the COVID keepers? So again, when I was on last year, I talked about this concept, and I think it was a very useful one for the prospects of what we faced last year. And indeed, even on into this year, the disruption isn't as bad, but we still have a lot of pupils off. We still have a lot of pupils that are being affected by COVID, and the ability to connect with pupils in the classroom and those at home at the same time is very important. And so what we developed last year in our school was a series of strategies and methods that we could use to do this, what I was calling resilient teaching, keeping the same connections between the elements, even whenever the system changes. And the one in particular that I want to spend a little bit of time looking at with you tonight is what we call the feedback loop. Now, what I'm referring to here isn't necessarily the kinds of marking that you do in books, which maybe takes a day or two to get back to the pupils. I'm talking about something in the moment. It's that sense of something that's happening right now that I can get a feedback from the pupils so that I can feedback to them. Rosenstein says this: effective teachers stop to check for understanding, and he says this is two purposes. It causes them to elaborate the material, that helps them to understand it. And it also alerts us as teachers when maybe they haven't quite grasped it and how we might need to reteach it for them. And yet, so much of last year was looking at screens like this. And that's very hard to get that feedback. So it was in that context that I came up with this notion of trying to find ways of getting this feedback from our pupils so that we can understand what they're how they're getting on in the moment. And I have a little analogy that I think would be useful to think of for this, and it's the dashboard. You're driving along in your car, and the dashboard gives you a whole range of different information, and that information is available to you in a very timely fashion, and you can act and respond to it. So the particular example that I want to use is of the digital jotter. Again, I shared it this time last year, I had only just started dabbling with it. And I want to reflect back on this past year on the difference that this has made, and why for me, it's definitely one of those COVID keepers, and I've been using it since. The setup is very simple. You just take a slide like that, you put the student's name at the top, and then copy and paste, and before you know it, you have a whole set of slides. Now, I should say that our context is that we have a very open bring your own device policy. Those are some sixth formers with their own devices, but even GCSE pupils with their phones, we're able to use this, their phones in class with the policy in place. So we're able to lean into that and develop it. So there is what the digital jotter looks like. And I'm going to just talk very briefly about 3 ways in which I can get some added benefit from it. And the first one is whole class monitoring. Now, here's a particular example I did with my GCSE pupils of a little bit of retrieval practice of material that we've covered before. So they all had a slide, and I was able just to watch them as they put that information in. And I was able to see how well they were able to recall it. So I'm getting that feedback to see if I need to reteach anything. And this is where I really got the benefit from using the digital jotter, because I can be sitting at my desk, go into slide view, and I can see every single pupil as they work and the work that they're doing. I get a helicopter view, an overview that was definitely adding value to the way that I would do this kind of thing. So if you like, in the past, it would have been the analog jotters, right? They would have come in their desks and I would have circulated around the room, having a look over the shoulders, trying to see how they're all getting on. This, if it doesn't look too sinister, is what I'm now able to do. Big brother is watching you. I'm able to watch them all at once, courtesy of that. And for me, this is adding value. This is one of these things that is keeping the continuity of learning for the pupils, but it's also making this more manageable for me because I'm able to monitor them so well. And one of the ways in which that helps my workload issue is that as I spot misconceptions coming up, I can address those misconceptions. Rosenstein says this: whenever we hear something new, we don't repeat it word for word. Rather, we construct a mental summary. This is the gist of what we've heard. And the gist, he says, is he says, when they're left on their own, many students make errors in the process of constructing this summary. He says they're not so much errors as attempts by students to be logical in a place where their background schema is weak. So a very quick example of this. This was done by Zoe White, most amazing PGCE student I had in with me last year. Imagine learning to teach during a global pandemic, but she did brilliantly. She was very, very resilient. But this is one of the examples where she was trying to do a little bit of an application task based on where you would find hydraulic pressure. Now, you need 2 things for hydraulic pressure. You need a crack in the rocks and water to be forced into the crack. And whenever water is forced into the crack, that puts pressure on and causes erosion. So she did the digital jotter with the pupils, and she got them all to annotate on. Here's Lucy's slide. Brilliant. Absolutely loads of detail on there, lots to be positive on here. Aha. But there's also a little misconception has crept in down at the bottom here. She talked about hydraulic pressure, and yes, there are cracks up there, but you're also not very close to the water. You're not going to get waves breaking in there. And Zoe and I were sitting in the classroom. All the students were still learning from home at this stage, and I was signaling to her, a few people have made that misconception. Do you want to jump on in there and say to them? So what she was able to do was to call the attention of all of the class and give a little bit of whole class feedback. I think whole class feedback is incredibly powerful and transformative. How many hours do you spend when you're marking, writing comments on books that, let's be honest, students probably don't really look at? And even if they do look at, what action do they take? Who's doing most of the work there? Is it really the pupil, or is it us, the teacher? Whereas this in the moment, while they're doing the work, before the misconceptions become embedded, we can give them feedback and say, hold on a minute, guys, just give me your attention here. Now, let's take a wee look at this. Why is hydraulic pressure not likely to occur up there? And we can give them some feedback and set them in the right way. And one of the things I've found with that as well is, I don't know if once you've done the work for you, you collecting in the books, and there's a lot of marking that goes on then. That's very often the checking and the feedback process. If you're checking them while they're doing it, using this kind of format, actually the marking is done while they're actually performing it. The marking is done while you're in the class with them. And it is not only more effective feedback for them, but also saves time later. And the final thing is the modeling of effective answers, because one of the comments that I got with the digital jotters, I started to share it, is, but can the pupils not see each other's answers? Well, the first thing is not really, because if you go into the slide view, you can see their little icons appearing on the slides, and it doesn't take you to say too many times, John, back to your own slide, please, before they get the feeling and the impression that Mr. Hamill sees all. And if I go to another slide, he's going to call me back again. But more than that, actually, I think this allows us to lean into the collaborative nature. Do you ever do any peer assessments? Do you swap answers with the pupils beside them? Well, what if you were able to do peer assessment across the whole class? What if you were to say to the students, okay, I want you to go now, having finished your task, I want you to look at other people's answers, and I want you to find what you think is the best answer, and vote for it just by hovering over the slide and your little icon appear. And what we're able to do then is to deconstruct what is a really good answer. Having had this one voted, and this was an example of how I annotated and color coded it, my comments in red, just really to bring the attention to the pupils of what constitutes really good writing. Now, again, to me, that adds value. Live feedback, peer assessment on a scale that wouldn't be possible any other way, and my ability to demonstrate to them how this is a good answer. Then, of course, you can send them back to your own slide. Away you go. In light of that, let's see if you can improve it. Who's doing the work there? And again, in the moment, we are doing the work in the classroom. This isn't work that's sitting waiting for us whenever we come back. So those are my 3 benefits. I could talk of others, but those were the top 3 that I thought I would share with you on why, for me, this is continuing this continuity of learning for pupils and sustainability for teachers. If you want to find out a little bit more, I'll share this presentation in the chat just when I'm done. A couple of websites that I've put together for our staff that contain a lot more detail on what we've done, and a number of my videos. You can check out my YouTube channel, and I spend far too much time on Twitter, so you can come and find me there if you would like to chat further. Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Alistair, thank you very much.